I was with my friend one day and I was all like, my hair is awesome. And he was like, my hair's awesome, that's you. And I was all like, my hair's awesome, that's you, that's you. And he was all like, my hair's awesome, that's you, that's you, that's you. And I was like, my hair's awesome, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you. And he was all like, my hair's awesome, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you. And I was all like, my hair's awesome, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you. And he was all like, my hair's awesome, that's you, 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 that's you. And I was all like, my hair's awesome, that's you, 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 that's you. Sorry, sir, I didn't know anybody else was in here. I was just talking to myself.
It's cold in this neck of Ohio tonight, and the style is right for a sad winter song. I feel lost like a speck in a pile out of sight, and though I try with all might, I just don't feel that strong. As we walk through a field trekking on snowy dirt, my eyes start to hurt trying to see a smile. And we talk about fears making our story short. You are scared to get shot, your bravery goes for miles. And there's more miles to go as we walk the train tracks. I think we lost the rain back in the woods we just hiked. And the store signs can glow as you walk sidewalk cracks. I think we lost the town back trading street lamps for kites. The nursery and all of the trees crossed over the dark, and some old parking lots hold my whimpering thoughts, and I'm on the next train. You and me, can't you see what this means? In the light of a torch, realize nothing is forced, nothing is forced.
Hi Lee, this is Hannah Glenn. Thanks for reaching out. I'm really honored to be able to contribute to this podcast, and it's really cool. I was checking out your earlier episodes and I really like it. I liked the idea when you mentioned it, and it's really sweet. I was listening to Erin's story and about her breaking her neck, and it was like so powerful. And it's so nice to be able to, I don't know, hear from you guys. I don't know, just so that your listeners know, we met both playing in bands. I was in the Faux Pas. I was Hannah Fritch at the time, before I got married. And obviously you're in third class. And so we went and played in Youngstown and met you guys, and just, I don't know, you guys were just some of the best people I've met in my life. And so really good to see what you're up to, hear what you're up to, and just, you know, it's great. And also, gosh, just Erin's, like, hearing about her, when she was, like, describing breaking her neck, it was so visceral, I felt like I was going to throw up. But she's so amazing and beautiful and strong, and such a cool story. So, anyway, to follow that up, I was thinking, the first thing I initially thought of when you asked me to think of a story about Ohio, the first thing that popped into my head was just how much I love the woods in Ohio. It's kind of always been just a place of solace for me. I recently read a study, actually, or an article based on all these studies in Japan at different Japanese universities, talking about the benefits of walking in the woods, and even things like lowering blood pressure and helping with depression, and things about the sense of the woods can just calm you and things like this. And it's, sort of validating, because it's something that I've always just found throughout my life. And it's something that's unique in my experience so far to Ohio, such a lush place. There's a lot of natural beauty here, the beaches and palm trees and everything, but it's a desert. So that was one of the first things I noticed. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm living in Los Angeles now. I moved out to Los Angeles a couple years ago. I'm doing copywriting and business writing and blogging and stuff out here in LA now. So one of the first things I noticed moving here was that it didn't really smell like anything. Even when I would go to the Griffith Park, which is a big park here, which is huge and awesome, but it's dry and sort of arid. There's not a whole lot of lush landscape, and so I really miss that about Ohio. The other thing is about it, I'm sort of realizing, I'm like pushing 30 here, and I'm sort of realizing that I've kind of always had a bit of an issue with battling anxiety. Even thinking back to, I remember being like a young kid, like as young as like maybe even 4 or 5, and laying in bed, and for some reason not being able to sleep, and literally shaking in fear because I was anxious about my parents dying, and it's just like, I don't know. I guess I only realized not that long ago that that's not totally normal, and there are things that I've been finding throughout my life, more and more lately even, that sort of really strike me with this anxious feeling, and I sort of get obsessed and fixated on things that I shouldn't, that are detrimental, and it's a feeling I can recognize now, and something that I used to really battle with going for walks in the woods. And I think it was, no matter what the situation was, if it was something, some like romantic, upheaval, or just my general anxiety popping up, I would always remedy it with walking in the woods, and it really, really helped a lot. I think it was a combination maybe of the exercise and the scents and just the environment, but it's very healing, and I miss that a lot. I think that it partly goes back to maybe my childhood. I grew up in the city in Toledo, but was sort of this weird little pocket in the city where we were our neighborhood was right behind this family-owned farm, Tom Strain's, and it was just a small farm, but it was right there. And I remember waking up in the morning and hearing, the tractor in the field, and the box window, to keep it cool in our room, and then on the other side of our neighborhood was this little wooded area and a creek. So I spent, my childhood kind of in the woods and around it. And whenever I was feeling anxious or whatever, sad, angsty, even as a child, I've always been, I think, a pretty emotional, romantic person, and it was something that both soothed me and sort of excited me and stuff. So, yeah, and then, it just kind of continued throughout my life. And then I remember when we got a dog, as faux pas, we got a dog, and then, he couldn't stay at Carrie's house, and he couldn't stay at Amanda's house, so he ended up staying at my house, and he became my dog. His name was Chuck, or is Chuck. God, he's not dead. I just haven't seen him because he's at home in Ohio with my mom, with a yard where he can run around and not in a, tiny apartment in LA cooped up. But, so I remember walking Chuck a lot in the woods. I sort of adopted him into my ritual, and of course he loved it. And one of my favorite parks to walk in Toledo was Oak Openings. It's a little more wild and really, really expansive, and well, for Toledo. And we were walking. I remember this one time we were walking, and I think I was upset about something at the time. I don't even remember what I was upset about now, which is just so great. There's so many things in life where I'll think, oh, I think I was upset about something, but I don't remember what it was, and that just so validates the fact that whatever we're going through at the moment, it probably won't matter as much later. So that helps. Anyway, so we're walking, and there's this one section of this path, it was called the Silver Path, where it sort of opens up into this pine forest. Rather closes in, sort of, because the pines are sort of all over you, but then the sunlight can come through just a little. And I remember walking, I think Chuck was off the leash because it was a big enough park that I could do that sometimes with him, and he was a good boy, he would stay with me. So he was off the leash and he was walking, trotting along just a little bit ahead of me, and I remember just looking at his golden fur, and it's kind of like shaking and as he trots along, and the silver lights kind of coming through the pine needles, and I remember realizing that I was just so happy. And I consciously stopped and made myself realize that and appreciate the moment. I was just really happy. And then I remember sometime later, after I met my husband, our first official date, well, we of course, we're just dating, was at this park. We went for a walk at the park, and I don't remember if I told him or not about the memory with Chuck. But so that was another just positive reinforcement of the woods and Ohio, and just so much love for that area. And then sometime later, Nick, that's my husband, and I went and took Chuck for a walk at the same park, and he proposed to me right there in that same spot in the pine forest. We must have discussed how beautiful it was, and I must have told him how much I liked it, because that would be too weird a coincidence if I hadn't mentioned it. And so there's just a lot of beauty and healing and love in the woods there that I just miss a lot. And particularly in the fall, when it's so pungent and colorful and just an experience to walk in the woods. And it's funny and cliche, and I know, like, when I first met Nick, that was, I think, one of course, the first things that we were like having small talk about. I was like, oh, I love fall, and he was kind of thought it was funny and laughed, and he was like, what, you're a girl and you like fall? I can't believe it. And he kind of teases me about it still to this day, but I can't help it. It's just true. It was in the 90s in October here this past year, and I was really grumpy about it. I was not happy. But so anyway, I actually, it's kind of funny because it's like I actually miss it so much. I miss it like I miss a friend. The woods in Ohio. It's that real. And I still, I'm here and I go on walks, and it helps, in the city, and it's just different. It's not that it's bad, it's just different, walks in the city here, or walks in the park, like I mentioned. But as far as like a way of dealing with anxiety, the walks help. Consciously kind of analyzing, okay, these are things I've been afraid of or anxious about in the past that turned out to be no big deal, didn't matter later, I was being completely irrational, that really helps. And then also just consciously taking the time to be grateful for what's good. Especially I find first thing in the morning and when I lay down at night, just taking stock in what I have in my life that's good, from accomplishments to the more important things like my husband and my family, who I love so much, and the people that I've met and the people I'm connected with, and my friends, and those are the things that really matter, and just appreciating them and just appreciating everything, from the fact that I can wake up in the morning and have hot water and a shower and all these things. And that takes me back to Aaron's thing again, the fact that my neck is not broken, I mean, it sounds like funny, but the fact that I can walk in the city or the woods or wherever I choose, the fact that my feet work and my legs work, and it's just something I try to not forget. And I actually have an article coming out pretty soon on lifehack.org, which is one of the blogs I'm contributing to at the moment, about this kind of, I think I titled it How to Not Worry So Much and Use Your Fears to Your Own Advantage. And so I talk about these different methods of trying to control and actually use fear to bring about good things in your life. I think it's something I've had to learn to master even more, maybe because I don't have the woods here like I used to. But I would say if you are near the woods in Ohio, do not take it for granted. Utilize that gift, because it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to experience. And I really do believe that it's healing and it's soothing, and I think that we need those things. So I guess my story is kind of just about my love of the woods in Ohio. And if you're out there, take a walk for me, please, and just really enjoy it, whether it's summer or fall or whatever, because it's irreplaceable. It's one of those things that's irreplaceable. So I think that is all I have. Thanks again so much, and I'm really enjoying the podcast. I've got it on my list now, and I'm going to keep up on it. So thank you.
You've been dodging bullets.
Nursery is sponsored by the Orange Avocado, an alternative bakery specializing in gluten-free and raw materials, and by the Speaking of Music show, an audio editorial program that dives deep behind the curtain of music culture of yesterday and today. Check out Speaking of Music's YouTube channel. If you're a music junkie, you're going to love the conversations these guys have. My friend Jimmy Fro, who also runs the Jimmy Fro Indie Music Show, is part of the entourage. You're going to enjoy it. Speaking of music, if you like the music on Nursery, go to thirdclass.net. Check out our $15 vinyl for sale. Check out our $5 digital downloads. Some free downloads thrown in there, like the 12 and 9 EP, or Seattle Stars, a compilation of 10 Youngstown artists covering one of our songs. And then mosey on over to bullskit.com. If you like the sense of humor on here, bullskit.com offers a plethora of free skits for you to watch and enjoy. They're very inappropriate. I hope you have a good time with all that, because it's your problem now. I wash my hands clean of anything that you do from this point on. It's all on you. You're on your own.
Hello, this is Drew, Diver. Lee told me, or invited me rather, he didn't tell me, I wasn't forced into anything, to talk on his podcast, and I was pretty excited. Even though I don't sound excited, I am excited. I never sound excited, but trust me, I am so excited. I was a little freaked out when he told me the amount of time I should talk, and just kind of gave me a general idea with travel, and I'm not really sure if that's a theme of the show that I'm gonna be on, but you're listening to it and it'll all come together in the end. It always comes together in the end. So you probably hear me shuffling papers and clicking pens, because I tend to doodle when I talk, and what's interesting is the notebooks I doodle in, a lot of them contain journal entries, and on the topic of travel, I guess these journal entries kind of travel back in time, if you will, to, I think, my band Horseshoes is on here. The previous episode you heard Jacob speaking, and Jacob and I had a band called Horseshoes. stories about when we both went overseas for the first time and like we're rushing to get passports. Because I grew up in Ohio, Jacob grew up in Ohio. My punk band, the Punch Bowl Spikers at the time, used to play with his synth pop band. And we never really spoke much. We always kind of appreciated kind of what each other was doing, but there was never like this hang out all the time situation. But I've always thought it was funny that even through that I ended up kind of coming back around, and he and I had started this band, and neither of us had left really on a tour of sorts, whether it be one show or a couple. And here we are, we have this band, this new kind of genre of indie pop, and all these artists that we're really into and on MySpace at the time talking about. And we're traveling to Sweden to play a show that we thought maybe was spam, and we were gonna get like beat up or just our money stolen or something. I don't know. At the time it was like a mixture of being really excited and scared, and is there really a demand for whatever it is that we were doing at the time. But yeah, it's all really interesting. And it's hard to sit here and talk, because what always happens, and that's my phone buzzing, I apologize, I'm looking at notes that I was taking, because I always tend to not have any ideas, and I lay down in bed to try to go to sleep, and that's when everything floods me. Melodies, ideas for, I don't know, just like the most weird things come to mind. So I just started to kind of type out these things, because it's dark. My wife is sleeping, and I don't want to freak her out by starting to dictate to anything, or turn on lights, or actually turn on my phone and just start talking about stuff while she's trying to sleep and wondering what I'm doing. And but yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about when I was living in Ohio. I was in Columbus, and I went to Audubon, and this always kind of stuck out, because this is kind of when I made a lot of friends in some of my favorite bands, like my friend John Sonnenberg of Travelogue, and I got to see Joy Electric for the first time, and that was in a south of Columbus area, where I think Joe's Pub, I don't know why the name of the town is slipping my mind, and I'm not sure of the name. But I remember driving down there to see these bands, and we're excited. I'm excited. I'm not saying we are excited, because it was just me that drove down there and meeting up with people. And I got to finally touch base again with like Caleb and Jacob, and meet Joanna and meet John Sonnenberg, who I'd like had this weird, he was like a serious role model to me in my life and in music, and it was almost as if somebody was meeting, like, I don't know, Morrissey or something. He's definitely not Morrissey, but and there's just a lot of weird things going on at this Audubon festival. Caleb, in particular, was at the time on a diet consisting solely of chocolate milk and cigarettes. I just remember him constantly having this huge, like, gallon of chocolate milk and just chain smoking. And I felt really bad for anyone that had to share sleeping quarters next to the bathroom that he may have had to use quite frequently on such a diet. But yeah, going back and forth with these shows in Audubon, in Ohio of all places. Joy Electric has a fan base that migrates there, which is really strange. Yeah, I don't know. I never used to travel much, only around between like Columbus and Sebring, Ohio, where I'm from. And then occasionally, obviously you drive everywhere when you're in Ohio because there is no mass public transport that will get you from one town to the next little town. Strange thing right now is that I'm asked. I feel like I always talk to myself like I was an only child growing up, so I had to entertain myself all the time. And when asked to do a handful of minutes, it's very daunting because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I sound really boring. And I'm sitting in a room and actually talking to myself and recording this right now. And I wonder why I have so few friends in life, and it's all coming together. But yeah, like while I have this journal in front of me, let me just kind of recap one thing that was always really funny to me, because what's even stranger now is that I go to Sweden like twice a year and have still stayed in touch with the original promoters that brought us as good friends. And like at a time I was on tour in South America with this Swedish band Taken by Trees, Victoria Bergsman of like Peter, Bjorn and John, and one of the like Swedish Institute people who was helping put on this event is talking with me, and he's like, hey, have you ever been to Sweden before? And it's like, yeah, actually, my band played there at the Baser for this like Svenska music club, and he's like, oh yeah, he's like, my two best friends, Rickard and Nicholas, run this, and those are the two that booked us. And it's so weird how vast the world seems and how quickly it shrinks as you kind of keep pushing through. And but just this funny thing I'm kind of seeing is I remember getting off the plane, like my first 8-hour flight. I'd only ever flown like 3 times before, and it was just to Orlando, which is 3 hours or something. And so we go through this like 8 to 9 hour flight. I have to pee like crazy. We get off the plane. For whatever reason, I don't pee. I get on this train, and we're met by our friend Hannah at the time, who is like a big indie pop person. Her brother's in Air France, so that was really crazy for us because we're really into all these bands, and all of a sudden we're like being bombarded by all of like our heroes of this genre that we're a part of now. And but like 30 minutes off, between getting out of the plane, or actually probably like an hour between getting out of the plane and getting into the city, and I keep saying like, oh, I really need to like find a restroom, and Hannah's just like kind of looking at me weirdly, and we walk around for like 20 more minutes, and I'm like, there's no restrooms? And she's like, yeah, there's Burger King, there's Presbyterian, it's like a cafe, and I'm like, what is she doing? And then I realized that I have here that, oh, in Sweden they call it a toilet. So she thought I was saying restaurant and taking me to all these places and showing me food. I don't know. It's just, as I'm looking at this, I was like, oh my God, that was really funny. But yeah, and it's funny reading through some of this stuff, just like how we played. So to me, I guess what at the time my very minimal scribblings on this paper was just that how our show went, and how I was freaking out and nervous the whole time because we only ever played like 2 shows, and I kind of keep following these things. And like even before I moved to New York and we were still playing in Orlando, the show Pop Mayhem on, it looks like August 20th of 2009, Caleb joined us and played a drum machine manually, which I thought, according to my writing, added a lot of dynamic, and thinking back on it, it did add a lot of dynamic to this. But yeah, so going back to being an only child, because I always find this topic of conversation interesting, because so many of my friends growing up always had a sibling or multiple siblings, and they always had bands with these siblings, or they traveled with siblings, did some sort of artwork with these siblings, and I was always so jealous because I did not have any siblings. I found myself most of the time especially back when I was living in Ohio. I was living in Columbus and constantly driving between Columbus and my hometown of Sebring, Ohio, which is like a 2.5 to 3 hour drive, depending on how fast you're going. And doing that, I learned, that's really where I started to kind of grow heavily with music and really listen to new bands and records. Because when you're sitting at home and someone gives you this band and it's a little challenging or it's not what you're used to listening to, you can quickly put this record on and find yourself just like flipping through comics or reading a book, or you're like messing around on the computer playing your guitar and you're not really paying attention to what's happening, or maybe it's just you don't have, like, you can't blast it or, you know, really indulge in it. And driving opened up so much to me in the world of just everything. I feel like I listened to kind of terrible bands when I was younger, and I started to just drive around and listen to these, you know, new artists. And with the internet at the time, you're kind of reaching out even beyond what your friends would kind of give you. But the best things are always what your friends did give you, because they maybe came from a different background, and either they were Christian or secular. I hate that word, but and you would find, you know, these bands that you always had seen or maybe had heard a lot about, but you just weren't, like, there was no reason to, oh, I'm gonna go sit down now and put this CD in and just listen to this album. But when you're driving, you're playing it over and over and over again, and you start to find yourself, you listen to the songs, you get beyond the songs, you listen to what instruments do I think they're using, or oh, these bass lines are really interesting, and, you know, who really listens to the bass player? I mean, come on, I love bass, but, you know, but I felt like I really started to learn how to construct songs and start to kind of daydream while I was driving about artwork and band names. And even my current band now, Soda Shop, I think I remember very clearly, for some reason, driving home, and Jacob was living in Orlando, and we would just always call one another, which is strange to me now because I never call anyone anymore, and I feel like nobody calls me anymore. It's just a quick text or whatever. And we're driving down the street, and I was like, hey, I have this idea, this band, I think Soda Shop, I think that's a really cool name, and I can kind of see this font face that I want to use, and I have this style now in my head because I've been really into these, like, Swedish indie pop bands at the time, like the Acid House Kings or Club 8. Even though it's drastically different now, those first couple songs were very influenced by the same, like, 3 records I was playing over and over again in my car as I was driving. And I feel like I had such a mental freedom back then. Now it's like living in New York, it's great, but I feel like I miss out on the highways, and especially when I've been kind of revisiting some Modest Mouse lately, and, you know, it just takes me back to, that's when I really learned to understand those records and how they were intended to be listened to, and the amount of focus I had on something new, and I could really hone in on it because I had to drive. I couldn't text, Instagram, have this record play, and, like, be talking to somebody. I was driving, it was nighttime or daytime, whatever. I was going a steady speed and just listening to these records, and it was amazing. And I really love travel now. I never used to want to leave my town. I was going to be like Hank Hill or something, but something inside me pushed me out, and I think everyone should travel in their lifetime, whether it be from one state to another, or cross a border, or don't buy the iPad for $500, but buy a round-trip ticket to, like, Colombia for $500 and grow mentally, expand your mind, your horizons. So I think I only have about 4 minutes left. So I suppose I should leave you with something of meaning. But instead, as I'm sitting here looking at my journal, I have a quote that I scribbled down at one point from one of my favorite poets by the name of James Kavanagh, or Kavanaugh, I believe. But it says, "I lie on the grass, boy-like, and search the sky. The clouds do not turn to angels, the winds do not whisper of heaven or hell." And I feel like that is a very freeing phrase, that we're here in this life, and this is the life we have, and we always need to make the best of it. And it can be in multiple ways. But yeah, I think you should all make the best of this life that you have. I'm kind of sneaky, because though this sounds very fluid, I've been slightly editing myself, and I feel like I sound like James Eha when I talk. I don't know if it's this microphone or if it's the fact that I'm sitting in front of a microphone, that I get like, my brain just is like, oh, I have to sound cool or something, but instead I just kind of sound annoying and like James Eha. I mean, I love James Eha, but I don't know. I hope you like James Eha, and I hope that you haven't skipped through the sound waves on SoundCloud, because you're like, this guy speaking in monotone for 20 minutes, this looks like about where he ends, and I'm gonna skip and go to the next thing. I hope you don't do that. I mean, you can. I probably would. But, yeah. It's been fun. I was actually in Ohio recently, but unfortunately, it was a very brief visit, or else I would have preferred to just do this live instead of sweating in my very humid apartment right now. But I hope to do this again. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to me ramble as much as I enjoy doing this and being on this show, and hopefully they'll have me back. But have a good evening, or afternoon, or commute, depending on what point in time you are currently listening to this. Take care.
Hi, my name is Amy Phillips, and I was asked by my good friend Lee to share a story for his podcast. I was born in Ohio and went to college in Ohio and got married in Ohio and work in Ohio and continue to live in Ohio today. I've spent all of my 31 years living in Ohio. I love to travel and explore new places, but Ohio will always be home. Having spent my whole life in Ohio, it's difficult to think of just one story to share. I think it may be best to start at the very beginning, my Ohio childhood. Growing up, I lived in a suburb outside of Cincinnati. I loved growing up in a suburb, although I often dreamed of living in a big city or in the country, and in reality, the suburbs gave me the best of both worlds. Space to run and explore, and also close access to a great city filled with things to do. I spent my days playing with my neighborhood friends. I remember summer days filled with explorations, playing basketball in the street, having my sister stop the ice cream man whenever he happened to come down my cul-de-sac. Of course, he wasn't always stopped before we had permission to buy ice cream. So once he was waiting, I then had to run inside and frantically beg my parents for money to buy ice cream. Wrong way to go about it, I know, but it was the only system that worked. My street was covered with black tar to fix the cracks in the pavement. At least I think that's why it was there. When the weather was hot, it would bubble up, and one of my favorite things to do was to sit and play with the softened tar. I would pop the bubbles and push the sticky tar around into different piles, and this was great fun. However, one time it didn't quite work out for me. This was a particularly hot evening, and the sun was just beginning to set. I remember the feel of the hot concrete as I sat there, enjoying the flashing fireflies and fresh air. The tar was especially soft, and it was warmer than the air in the rapidly approaching darkness. As I pushed the ooey-gooey tar around, I made a critical mistake. I forgot to keep my hair pulled back, and unfortunately, my hair dipped just a small bit into the tar. I remember immediately regretting the choice I had made and thinking, I'll just pull off this tiny bit of tar right here and I'll pull it out of my hair. This, however, proved to be impossible. As I tugged at it, it only made matters worse, spreading the tar throughout my long hair. As you can imagine, my mom was not too thrilled. While she could cut it out, this made a big impact on my appearance, which she was not too thrilled with. So instead of relaxing that summer evening and playing in the neighborhood as everyone else was doing, I spent the evening with my mom, rushing around before bedtime, searching for a hairdresser that was still open. Fortunately, we were able to find a place that was still open, and it happened to be an amazing hairdresser who not only saved me that night with the tar, but also continued to be my hairdresser all the way until my wedding many years later. I remember falling asleep on summer evenings with the windows still open and the lights still shining. I had what I perceived to be a very early bedtime, so I was never too happy when I had to go to bed with the lights still out. I remember being able to hear the kids outside playing, kids who during the winter time when the sun set earlier became my partners in adventure. Although we were in the suburbs, we still had access to nature. Behind the houses across the street was a winding creek. Not too deep, but perfect for exploring. I remember being told not to swim in the water due to the fact that the sewage most likely was seeping into our adored creek. However, no parents were following us as we explored, and while we did not swim in the water or touch the water intentionally, we still found plenty of ways to appreciate it. One of my favorite winter activities was adventuring down by the creek. All bundled up, we would set out on our own, away from the prying eyes of parents, and explore to find areas where the creek had frozen over. In these places, the appointed explorer would venture out onto the ice to see if it was safe for others to pass. Sometimes it was, and we would scramble eagerly across. Other times it wasn't, resulting in a wet foot or ankle or pants or more, and hopefully not too much sewage. We would play in the woods in our creek any season, any time of day, until we would hear the telltale call of a parent, "Amy, dinner!" to which we were trained to stop our activities, ignored the first few times, hoping that maybe it was a mistake and our parents would just go inside and stop. However, that was never the case, and then eventually take off back home for dinner with our families. Although I dreamed of big city adventure or of country splendor, living in the suburb offered up a priceless childhood filled with journeys I will never forget.
I went with some friends to Hocking Hills in Ohio, and we went on some hikes and saw some caves and some cliffs and some waterfalls and some beautiful snowy trails. And Then the next year we went to Hocking Hills again and hiked a little bit less and got a cabin that was a little smaller than the one last time. And then like the year after or so, we went to Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, and went snow tubing and got a hotel room. And I tell you this because it's an interesting thing. It seems like we start with a little bit like more extravagance and then work our way back to basics instead of the way you would think we would do it. Same deal with third class. I go with my friends Pepe and Jack on tour at a 9-day, 9-show tour in 2012. And we go to New York, Maine, West Virginia, some places in Ohio and PA, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maryland. And then we come home next year. We just go on a smaller tour that just hits Indiana, Illinois, Milwaukee. And then the next year we just go on a 2-date excursion to New Jersey and then like 3 other dates in Ohio. It's weird. It's like in not wanting to repeat ourselves, we downsize our events a lot. And I'm not saying that's where it ends. It's just a neat idea that the way that like some of the people I know and love move forward is actually to take the steps most people would take first. It's like you start big and complicated with progressive rock and you end with just a couple strings and some folk music and just a small backbeat. And it's just so interesting to think like that's how you could do things. It's not always building up to something that's more and more overly expressed. It can be whittling down that main event to the essence.
This is Jimmy Martin from the Speaking of Music show at YouTube. Thanks for listening to the Nursery Podcast.